what I wanted to talk about today is the Scarlett Johansson Exorcist movie news, the new one from Blumhouse and Universal, the Mike Flanagan written and directed Exorcist movie that is coming out sooner than I anticipated. I am going to go through this article from Deadline. It was an exclusive from Deadline, and I'm going to go through paragraph by paragraph and kind of annotate and give my takes after each bit of news that pops up. So let's start at the beginning. Good place to start. For the new radical take on the upcoming Exorcist film, Blumhouse Atomic Monster is not messing around, as Deadline has learned that two-time Oscar nominee Scarlett Johansson is set to star in the next installment of the iconic horror franchise from writer-director Mike Flanagan. All right, Blumhouse Atomic Monster. This is the Blumhouse, and Atomic Monster is James Wan's production company. So it's kind of the team up here. So they're involved in this as well. Where I want to start, though, is with Megan 2.0, which I know is a weird place to start, but it was immediately after Megan 2.0 flopped at the box office this past summer. Jason Blum called in to entertainment journalist Matt Belloni's podcast, The Town, and gave a sort of post-mortem on Megan 2.0's opening weekend. It's actually a really great and honest interview, and I think it might end up containing some newsworthy information for fans of horror and the types of movies, horror movies that are going to be released in theaters moving forward, especially from Blumhouse. But I've highlighted a couple of quotes from that interview, and I want to read them off because I think they give insight into the thought process of Universal and Blumhouse here with this new Exorcist movie starring now Scarlett Johansson. Here's from the quotes from Jason Blum. There's clearly a huge audience that wants to go to the movies. We just can't figure out what movies they want to go and see. I think people need theatrical events. I think we need to up the budgets. I don't think the market can absorb as much horror as there is for sure. 2025 has been a big year for horror at the box office, but what's interesting, I was actually looking at this yesterday, is just how top heavy it has been. So I actually kind of see where Blum is coming from with that. I don't think the market can absorb as much horror as there is for sure, because I believe what he was saying, and if I remember the context correctly, it's that it's kind of pushing out a lot of the lower mid-budget movies that Blumhouse has been known for having success with. Audiences seem to be picking their spots when it comes to going to the movies. Sinners felt like an event. The Conjuring was the final, was it the last rites? I haven't seen it yet, but that was the quote unquote final movie in that franchise. So that was the hook there. This upping the budget and making event style movies is a change from the Blumhouse formula that has worked so well for them in the past. That lower mid-budget movie that really catches on. To me, this Exorcist movie that they are beginning to make is shaping up to be much more in line with something like Sinners or 28 Years Later. Big name talent, both in front of and behind the camera, being the major selling point. All right, let's get back to the article. Scarlett is a brilliant actress whose captivating performances always feel grounded and real, from genre films to summer blockbusters, and I couldn't be happier to have her join this Exorcist film, said Mike Flanagan. All right, so that was a quote from Mike Flanagan. That was not the author doing PR work for her. I like Scarlett Johansson. Do I have a favorite Scarlett Johansson performance? I guess probably Ghost World, Lost in Translation. I liked her well enough in some of her bigger budget work. The Avengers movie she's good in, but I kind of like her indie work or her smaller work better. And that's the case with a lot of actors and actresses. I think this is intriguing casting in the sense that she is a big enough star that she can pick who she wants to work with. I think Mike Flanagan is the type of director that can carry some weight outside of the horror realm as well. And I can see her being drawn to the project for that reason as well. I'm not sure how much she talks with her Avengers co-stars, but Tom Hiddleston just did Life of Chuck with Mike Flanagan, which is a movie that I would not be shocked if it made my top 10 at the end of the year. I really, 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 really love that movie. And I can see her being drawn to a filmmaker. Maybe they talked. She doesn't come cheap, though. And I can very much see her demanding a high price to come in and try to salvage this franchise, because that's essentially what this film is going to have to do if they want to keep making them. She's riding the box office of the latest Jurassic World movie, which it didn't hit the 1 billion mark of the other Jurassic World movies, the other films in the franchise, but it did perform very well. It brought in $865 million worldwide. I think it's 4th place this year overall. She's a star, and she gets paid like one. These are estimated salaries, but just taking a quick look at what she's been paid on some of her recent big budget work, I think this is where the Exorcist movie may end up paying for as well. Here's what we've got. Jurassic World Rebirth, she got paid $15 to $20 million. Black Widow, $15 million. Ghost in the Shell, $17 million. Lucy, $8 to $10 million. This is all through a Google search. Forbes has some of this information, but as you can see, her salary, and it makes sense, has grown over the years. So if you are landing her for your movie, you're probably going to be paying in that $15 to $20 million range. And judging by some of the factors surrounding this new Exorcist film, which we'll touch on in a minute, I wouldn't be surprised if it was on the higher end of those estimated salaries, probably maybe closer to $20 million. Let's get back to the article. Johansson's involvement is a clear sign that the studio is serious about this latest version of the franchise after the last film, 2023's Exorcist Believer, underperformed with $65.5 million domestic and $136.2 million worldwide. Yeah, the movie actually did pretty well worldwide. This after NBC Universal, Peacock, and Blumhouse bought the rights from Morgan Creek for $400 million back in 2021. David Gordon Green, the director of that movie, withdrew from the next installment, I believe immediately after release, maybe even that came out during, before release. I don't remember. But all right, here is where we need to talk about that original deal that Blumhouse made for those Exorcist rights and why they are trying so hard to salvage this franchise, as the article mentions, back in 2021. And that was coming out of the pandemic, and it was also just a year after the launch of Universal's streaming service Peacock. And I think that's important to note here, that they were trying a lot of things, because part of the issue with Peacock early is the Olympics. The 2020 Olympics, it was meant to launch with those, and that got delayed. And so they were looking for all sorts of stuff to sell that streaming service. But the rights to the franchise, the Exorcist franchise, as the article mentions, were secured for $400 million. Now, that did not include production budget, marketing costs, distribution, talent salaries, all that good stuff. $400 million for just the rights to the franchise. Now, I do think it's important to put yourself in the shoes of Universal and Blumhouse in 2021, and the best way to do that, I think, is through the Halloween franchise. When Halloween 2018 came out, that franchise had been pretty dormant. It had been 9 years since a new movie came out. That film's opening weekend was huge. It made $76.2 million domestic, which at that time was the second best ever debut opening weekend for a horror movie. That film would go on to make $255 million worldwide, and it was well received by fans. By this point, July 2021, Halloween Kills had not been released. If I recall correctly, Blumhouse was pretty happy with Kills, according to early reports. So if we are going off of what we have at that point when they bought the franchise rights for The Exorcist, if you make another 200 or 250 million worldwide with Halloween Kills, you are golden. 145 million would have made up what you paid for the rights, and this isn't even including the third film in the trilogy and all of the other ancillary financial possibilities. And to be fair, Halloween Kills opened pretty well, especially considering that it was released the same day on streaming. It actually made $50 million domestic, which was a pretty huge number coming out of the pandemic, and it would go on to make around $133 million. So a quick back of the napkin math here puts it at $388 million without the streaming revenue that it surely raked in as well for Universal Peacock. So while that $400 million rights acquisition was certainly risky, looking back on things now, it's kind of completely nuts, but I can see what they were thinking at the time, especially with how happy they were with the choice of filmmaker in David Gordon Green, a guy they had a lot of confidence in because they were very happy with what he was doing with the Halloween franchise. From what I remember, the reception for Kills was pretty mixed. Looking at Rotten Tomatoes, Halloween 2018 had a 79% critic score and a 72% audience score. Kills was 38% critic score and a 66% audience score. So you can see the mix there. Audience score is still okay. Halloween Ends holds a 39% critic score, so pretty much the same as Kills, and a 55% audience score. So that one is the one that really split the audience. And this isn't a perfect science. A lot of these ratings that I grab from Rotten Tomatoes have come later, but I do remember word of mouth being toxic around Halloween Ends at the time of release. And I think the box office reflected that because it brought in just over 103 million total, which for a horror movie is not bad, but for that, I mean, that is less than half of, I think it had a stay and date streaming release too, but it's less than half of Halloween 2018. And I think the bloom was off the rose for David Gordon Green by the time Exorcist Believer, his movie, was released, to the point where I think if you put what they were hoping to market it with on the poster, which was from the director of Halloween trilogy, the new Halloween trilogy, Halloween Ends, Halloween Kills, Halloween 2018, I think that was a negative with horror fans and meant nothing to anybody outside of horror fandom. Also, I think if you couple that with a franchise in The Exorcist that I don't think has a fan base, I don't think it has as rabid a fan base as the Halloween franchise, and it's never been able to live up to the original film. And I think you have some of the reasons why Believer underperforms so much. I say underperformed because it actually made more money than Halloween Kills or Halloween Ends worldwide with 136 million, but it was DOA. And the studio moved on from David Gordon Green and the planned trilogy pretty quickly after its release. All right, back to the article. The studio had been taking meetings with a number of top talent, but Johansson seemed like a perfect fit after helping relaunch the Jurassic World franchise this past summer with Jurassic World Rebirth. That's how they're positioning it, which racked up close to $869 million worldwide. Following a meeting with producers and Flanagan, Johansson was on board to lead the relaunch of another marquee franchise. Insiders tell Deadline that scheduling had to be worked out with a couple of upcoming projects, but this film will likely be next on her docket to shoot. So they are, I don't want to say fast-tracking it, but we're getting going here. This project also gives Johansson her first legit horror film in a long and successful career. Wait a minute. Disgusting. Eight-legged freaks erasure in that paragraph, by the way. Also, maybe some Under the Skin. But so I do, real quick, what I want to talk about the importance of franchises in the streaming era. And it's obvious that Johansson is looking for these post-Avengers, which is a big reason why she signed on here. She's essentially doing the female version of the old Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson franchise Viagra bit. But Exorcist, despite some of my misgivings with it being a franchise, and I think some of the weaknesses of it being positioned that way, is still a name in the horror world, and even outside of it. Non-horror fans know the name, the IP, the intellectual property. It has name recognition that I'm not even sure something like Nightmare on Elm Street has. People know Freddy, people know Jason Voorhees, but do they know the movies, the name of the movies they are in? If you go talk to Joe Blow on the street, does he know? Would he be more likely to know what The Exorcist is or Friday the 13th? I don't know. Also, it's a way to sell. Franchises are a way to sell your streaming service, which is a big reason why studios are desperate for intellectual property IP. So let's talk about the current subscriber value for Peacock, as they will be the ones with exclusive streaming rights for The Exorcist. Currently, a Peacock premium plan, which I believe has ads, which is another revenue stream, is $10.99 a month. A premium plus plan is $16.99 a month. Most subscribers tend to go for the cheaper plan, so let's just say the average is around $11 to $13 a month. So let's just split the difference, go $12 a month. So even if a movie bombs or underperforms, if it can convince, 100,000 people to sign up or keep their subscription for another month until it comes out, or say, hey, all the Exorcist movies are on Peacock, I just want to binge watch them for Halloween, there's another million or so in the pocket of the parent company. And then, and this is the job of the streamers, if they can convince you to stick around for, Twisted Metal, or they have the NBA now, or Traitors, they may have you locked in for years, or at least the times those are on. But that's some of the value movies have like this for these streamers. And I'm not even going to touch on PVOD, Premium Video on Demand. I'm kind of just focused more on what they can provide. Now, I think movies have become kind of added value, but they keep people around. So that's another piece of this. There are also things, and Universal is an example of this, like theme parks. Obviously, they aren't going to make an Exorcist ride at Universal Studios theme parks, I don't think, but I say this as someone who has gone to Halloween Horror Nights, their haunted house event, multiple times. The Exorcist has been there in the past, and it's a perfect fit for that event. And it's something that they don't have to pay another studio for licensing on. It's an in-house franchise. This year, I saw they were having a Friday the 13th house, and I'll use myself as an example here, and I said, I have to go. The hope is that there are people out there like me, but for an Exorcist house. You get those people and you hook them, and maybe they are repeat customers spending hundreds of dollars at your park every year. These are just a couple of examples of the different revenue streams out there for franchises, especially. And it's also why it's really murky figuring out whether something is a success or not. I still think box office haul is probably the best barometer for us as laymen, but the numbers that these studios have may tell a slightly different story. We don't really have access to a lot of those numbers, and honestly, I don't know how much the studios know either. The big issue with all of what I'm talking about here, and as far as The Exorcist goes, is that eventually you're going to have to make something people want to spend money on. And I don't think they've done that yet. All right, we're going to finish up the article here. This film will tell an all-new story set in the Exorcist universe and is not a sequel to The Exorcist Believer. It is produced by Blumhouse, Atomic Monster, Morgan Creek Entertainment, and Mike Flanagan, who will also write and direct, via his Red Room Pictures banner. Alexandra Magistro will also executive produce for Red Room Pictures. David Robinson, I don't think the San Antonio Spurs legend, produces for Morgan Creek Entertainment. Jason Blum and Ryan Turek serve as the respective producer and executive producer for Blumhouse, Atomic Monster. Okay, so I don't see James Wan's name on there anywhere. So I believe Atomic Monster is him, but don't quote me on that. After all this, I'm going to say this. I'm actually encouraged and hopeful. Here's the thing, and this is important to remember. I know I've gone through a lot of financial information here. It's not my money. I do not care about how much money is being spent on this movie. Could it be used for better things for humanity? Sure, but I think we're past that point. I want every movie. I think almost every movie. Every movie I see, I want it to be good. I want Blumhouse and Universal to make a good Exorcist movie because I'm going to watch it. I have faith that Mike Flanagan wants to make a good movie. I think that Scarlett Johansson signed up to work in a genre that she doesn't normally work in because she believes in this project. I believe that Universal wants this to be a good movie because they have so much invested in this franchise. This kind of seems like their one last big swing at this whole thing. It seems like a do or die situation when it comes to them comes to this franchise. Will it be a success? Creatively, I'm optimistic for the reasons I have outlined. What's nice about that is I think it being a financial success is dependent on how it's received by audiences and critics. So they have extra motivation here to make a good movie. I think early reviews are going to be so important for this movie. This movie needs good pre-release buzz to get people out to see it and kind of wash the taste of the last movie, or just make people, I kind of think people have forgotten about that movie anyway, but if people like it, word of mouth may provide some legs for it as well. I'm a little bit less bullish on it making the kind of money it would need to make. I mean, it would have to make beyond. But if we're saying, if I think it's going to be closer to Sinners in its 200 and whatever million, or Exorcist Believer, I'm probably closer to Believer in what it's going to make, probably coming in around just over 100 million. And some of that is because Flanagan doesn't have the greatest track record at the box office and has kind of underwhelmed financially with franchises in the past. With Dr. Sleep is the one I'm thinking of. But on the other hand, Dr. Sleep is one of my favorite modern movies, period. I love it. So there you go. That is kind of a recap and a look at the Scarlett Johansson joining the new Exorcist movie news.